"You have 24 hours to get out of my property, you parasite," Thomas Mitchell shouted, pointing his finger straight at Esperanza's face, while the other farm staff watched embarrassing silence. "And take your whole family of profiteers with you." The December rain fell heavily over the small house at the back of the property, where Esperanza had lived for the last 3 years to meticulously take care of the stables and keep the main house impeccable. At 34, this Honduran immigrant never imagined that his life in the United States would be destroyed by a lie as cruel as absurd. Thomas had woken up with a terrible headache and a furious wife questioning the disappearance of her family ring. The truth was very clear in his hazy mind. He had lost the ring playing poker the night before, betting more than he could lose. But confessing this to Eleanor would mean facing an epic scolding and possibly divorce. It was much easier to blame the immigrant employee. "Mr. Mitchell, I never stole your ring," said Esperanza with a calm that surprised herself. Her dark eyes kept an unshakable dignity, as if he kept a secret that he even understood herself yet. "How dare to contest me?" Thomas spat the words with visible disgust. "You should thank you for not calling the police yet. People like you can't be reliable, everyone knows that." Thomas laughed with contempt, his red face of anger contrasting with the expensive suit he even wore to visit the farm. "Of course not. Amazing coincidence. My family ring disappears exactly the day you cleaned my office, right?" He gestured theatrically, taking advantage of the audience of employees to humiliate even more Hope. The truth was quite different, and Thomas knew exactly that. He had lost the ring playing poker at the casino Riverside 3 nights earlier, betting over $5,000 he didn't have. The memory of shame was still burning. "I had pledged the great-grandfather's family relic to cover the debt with Johnny Shark Peterson, a loan that did not accept excuses. But confessing this to Eleanor would mean faces not only an epic scolding, but possibly the investigation of an financial auditor she had threatened to hire. And who better to blame than the immigrant employee who lived in favor on her property and couldn't defend herself? "Dad, are you sure?" he whispered. 16-year-old Rebecca Mitchell, watching from the main house window with the clenched fists. She had seen her father reaching at 3 a.m., taking something out of her finger and hiding in the glove box of the car. But confronting Thomas Mitchell was publicly something that even his own daughter dared to do. Eleanor Mitchell appeared on the porch at that moment, his arms crossed in cold expression. "Thomas, don't you think it's being a little too dramatic?" Her words went slow and calculated, as well as who knows her husband's vices but chooses her battles carefully. Esperanza embraced her 8-year-old daughter Sophia, who was silently crying to see the few family possessions being thrown in the rain. Her husband, Carlos, had died in a construction accident for 2 years, leaving them alone in a country where each day was a struggle for survival. His Hispanic neighbors watched out the window, some with tears in his eyes, but all knowing that interfering would mean losing his own jobs. "Mommy, where are we going?" Sophia asked in Spanish, her small voice lost in the noise of the intensified storm. "Don't worry, piss. God has a plan," replied Esperanza, drying her daughter's tears as her own eyes revealed something that Thomas Mitchell could never interpret correctly. A strange, almost serene calm, as if that terrible moment was exactly what she was waiting for a long time. Marcus Jenkins, the oldest foreman, approached discreetly as Thomas gestured on the phone with Eleanor. "Esperanza, we all know you would never do that," he murmured, looking around. "Yesterday you returned the $20 that fell from my pocket. If you need references to a new job, thank you, Marcus, but I don't think I need references," she replied with a mysterious smile that made the man confused. As someone who had just been publicly humiliated could be so confident, Thomas hung up the phone and turned his attention to the scene. "And this is a lesson for all of you," he shouted, pointing to the other employees. "Zero tolerance for dishonesty on this property. It doesn't matter how long they work here." Johnny Martinez, the youngest of employees, murmured between teeth. 3 years cleaning his home and Nunca took her a paper clip. But of course, it's always the immigrants' fault, right? The other farm workers, Marcus, Pete, and Johnny, all white Americans hired less time than Esperanza, diverted their embarrassed eyes. They knew she was the most dedicated and honest employee that Mitchell had already had, waking up at 5 a.m. every day and working until after sunset. But no one would dare to confront the millionaire boss. "This woman took care of her horses better than you take care of your own family," Marcus murmured between teeth, too low for Thomas to hear. Rebecca Mitchell, still in the window, discreetly recorded expulsion with her cell phone. Something in his father's attitude bothered her deeply. She had known Hope since she was a child and has never seen her lie about anything. "And don't come looking for a job anywhere in this region," shouted Thomas, entering his silver Cadillac. "I will personally make sure everyone knows what kind of people you are. I will call all the farmers within 100 kilometers. Eleanor Mitchell watched from the porch, his tight lips in a thin line. Part of her suspected that her husband was lying again, as he had done so many times about his losses in the game. But questioning Thomas publicly would be unthinkable for a woman of her social position. As the car walked away raising wet dust, Esperanza remained standing for a few seconds, watching the house where she had worked tirelessly for 3 years. Her Hispanic neighbors approached offering help, but she just waved kindly, as if she knew something they didn't know. "Mommy, are you okay?" Sophia asked, pulling her mother's skirt. "Better than ever, Piss," said Esperanza, and for the first time that terrible day, a little smile appeared on his lips. Sometimes the greatest blessings are disguised as injustice. That same night, in a cheap motel 50 kilometers away, Esperanza opened her cell phone and typed a message to someone. What she wrote would make Thomas Mitchell deeply repent of every word she said on that rainy day of December. The next morning she made a call that would last exactly 47 minutes. The person across the line laughed so much that Esperanza had to push the ear from the ear. When the conversation ended, she knew that her life was about to change forever. But before we discover the content of that mysterious message and that decisive connection, there is something about Esperanza's past that would completely change his opinion on who had actually got into the wrong person on that farm. If you're enjoying this story of injustice and turnaround, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what's coming will leave you jaw-drop with the intelligence of this extraordinary woman. 3 weeks after humiliating expulsion, Esperanza's life had become a real hell. Thomas Mitchell had fulfilled his cruel promise to spread the word over it throughout the region. "Sorry, honey, but Mr. Mitchell called me personally," said Margaret Cooper, owner of a neighboring farm, avoiding looking at Esperanza's eyes. "He told me about the incident. I can't take this risk with my jewelry and money at home." It was the 12th refusal in 3 weeks. Thomas had orchestrated a systematic defamation campaign, calling each farmer, ranch and family home within 150 kilometers. His influence as one of the richest ranchers in the region made a simple connection of his own enough to destroy any chance of employment. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Sophia whispered in the tight room of the pension where they were temporarily hosted, thanks to the generosity of other immigrants from the Hispanic community. Esperanza opened her wallet almost empty. Only 15 years of economy left. Everything else had been spent on pension and food in recent weeks. Humiliation burned more than hunger. A woman who had worked 14 hours a day for 3 years, now reduced to dependence on the charity of others. Thomas, meanwhile, celebrated his victory at the Riverside Country Club, where he has been a member since he was 18. "You don't believe in these people's audacity," he told his circle of millionaire friends, gesturing with his $300 whiskey. "You give opportunities, and they bite the hand that feeds them." "You did the right thing, Thomas," agreed Harrison Wells, owner of the largest supermarket chain in the region. "You can't let it be beaten. If not, it becomes a zone where anyone can steal and go unpunished." What Thomas didn't know was that Eleanor had found his family ring in the Cadillac glove drawer, exactly where he had hidden after the night at the casino. She held the piece for long minutes, her mind processing the magnitude of the lie that her husband had told. "Daughter of the liar," she murmured, but not about Esperanza. For the first time in 20 years of marriage, Eleanor Mitchell was clearly seeing the true character of the man with whom he shared the bed. Rebecca, in turn, had discreetly posted on social networks an outburst about injustices we witnessed without mentioning names, but some close people started asking questions. The recording she had made on her cell phone was stored as evidence, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, Esperanza received a daily connection from her sister Isabella in Chicago. "This situation cannot continue," the lawyer insisted. "Let me sue this man for defamation. I have contacts. We can destroy him legally." "Not yet, sister," said Esperanza with patience that would surprise anyone who knew her only as the home Honduran. "Trust me, he will still dig his own deep tomb." The truth was that Esperanza was documenting each call, every job refusal, every discriminatory comment that reached her ears through the region's immigrant workers network. His small notebook grew day after day, becoming a detailed file of Thomas's systematic defamation campaign. "He told me specifically so as not to hire such people," confided Jose Martinez, foreman of a nearby farm, during a Spanish conversation with Esperanza. "I said you are all the same, that you cannot be reliable." Each report was carefully noted: date, time, witnesses, exact phrases. What Thomas interpreted as the silent victimization of a helpless immigrant was, in fact, the methodical construction of a devastating legal case. Marcus Jenkins, the former foreman Mitchell Farm, appeared at the pension on a rainy night. "Esperanza, I need to tell you something," he said, looking nervously. "I found the boss's ring on the office floor 3 days after you left. It was under the table, as if it had fallen from the drawer." "Are you sure of the date?" asked Esperanza, already writing down everything. "Absolute. It was on Friday, December 15th. I remember why. It was the day of payment." Marcus hesitated. There is one more thing. I heard him on the phone with his wife confessing that he had lost the ring in the game. I thought you should know. Esperanza smiled for the first time in weeks. The final piece of the puzzle was fitting. Marcus, do you accept to witness in writing about it? Of course, this injustice has already crossed the limits. That night, Esperanza called Isabella and said only 5 words. Sister, it's our turn. But what Thomas Mitchell couldn't imagine was that his defamation campaigns were about to turn into the greatest mistake of his life. Because Esperanza Gonzalez was not just a Honduran domestic seeking justice, she was the sister of one of Chicago's most feared lawyers, specializing in cases of discrimination and with a 97% victory rate against arrogant entrepreneurs. And the plan that the two sisters were about to put in action, Faria Thomas begged for the use of the same woman he had publicly humiliated 3 weeks earlier. 2 months after his expulsion, Esperanza finally got a cleaning job in a small office, gaining 1/3 of what he received on the farm. But what Thomas Mitchell didn't know was that that small office housed one of the largest law firms specializing in labor rights in the country. Are you sure you want to do this? Asked Isabella Gonzalez, watching her younger sister meticulously organize dozens of documents about the office's mahogany table. Once we start, there is no return. Esperanza smiled, her eyes shining with a determination that only those who had been publicly humiliated could understand. Sister, I've been waiting for this moment for 3 years, since the first day I stepped on that farm. The truth about Esperanza Gonzalez was finally being revealed. She was not just a Honduran immigrant seeking survival in the United States. He was graduated in business administration from the Honduras National Autonomous University, spoke 4 languages fluently, and had chosen to work as a domestic specifically to document discriminatory practices against immigrants in the rural region of Texas. His research was brilliant, admitted Isabella, flipping through the notebooks filled with a girl. 3 years infiltrated, documenting under minimum wages, absence of safety equipment, systematic discrimination. You have enough material to overthrow a dozen farmers. Esperanza had recorded conversations, photographed precarious working conditions, and noted every racist comment he heard during his 3 years at Fazenda Michelia. What began as a master's dissertation on immigration and rural work had become much larger. But now he gave me the perfect gift, said Esperanza, pointing to a specific folder marked as Systematic Defamation. Thomas Mitchell, organized campaign to destroy my reputation, witnesses willing to testify, evidence of discrimination. He built our case alone. Marcus Jenkins had become a crucial ally, providing internal details on farm operations and witnessing about the discovery of the ring. Rebecca Mitchell, now 17, had secretly sought hope, offering the expulsion recording and revealing that there was more evidence about her father's betting addictions. My father has serious problems with games, confessed Rebecca during a secret meeting at the public library. My mother is gathering evidence for the divorce. She said you went to the water drop, finally saw who he really is. Eleanor Mitchell had become an unexpected source of information. Tired of 20 years covering her husband's lies and vices, she began to secretly document Thomas's financial losses in the game, including loans against the farm itself. He mortgaged 40% of the property to cover betting debts, said Eleanor during a discreet meeting with Isabella. I'm preparing my own way out, but I want you to have everything they need first. Meanwhile, Thomas continued to celebrate his victory against Esperanza, without realizing that each conversation at Country Club was being discreetly recorded by other displeased members with their racist attitudes. Harrison Wells, who had publicly supported the expulsion, would secretly begin to question if he had chosen the wrong side. Did you hear what he said about Mexican workers at yesterday's party? He whispered Wells to his wife during dinner. I'm starting to think that maybe that woman wasn't the thief of the story. Isabella had gathered a team of 5 specialized lawyers, as well as private investigators who discovered that Thomas owed more than $300,000 for loan sharks, information that could destroy not only their reputation, but all their financial situation. The beauty of all this, explained Isabella to his team, is that he created the perfect trap for himself. Every defamatory connection he made is documented. Each employment refusal based on his lies is additional evidence. He turned unfair dismissal into a federal case of discrimination and defamation. Esperanza had also discovered that it was not the first. Through his network of contacts in the Hispanic community, he found 3 other immigrant women who had suffered similar treatment of Thomas over the years, all fired on false accusations when they tried to claim basic labor rights. Maria Ruiz, 2019, Carmen Vasquez, 2021, Ana Morales, 2022, Leah Isabella of a file, all with almost identical stories. False accusations of theft or incompetence, followed by campaigns to prevent them from finding new jobs. The Gonzalez sisters' plan had 3 phases. First, process for defamation and labor discrimination. Second, collective action gathering all previous victims. Third, public exposure through the national media, transforming the case into a symbol of the struggle for immigrant rights. Does he want a war? Esperanza murmured, looking out the window of the office towards the region where the Mitchell farm was. Because there will be a war, but you will find that you chose the wrong opponent. Thomas Mitchell had no idea that his poker nights and racist attitudes had aroused the wrath of one of the country's most feared lawyers, which specializes in turning cases of discrimination into devastating victories against arrogant entrepreneurs. And what he could definitely not imagine was that in 72 hours, his life would begin to crumble in such a spectacular way that he himself would beg for the forgiveness of the same woman who had publicly humiliated months earlier. It was 9 a.m. on a Monday morning when Thomas Mitchell received the call that would destroy his life forever. Mr. Mitchell, here is David Patterson, from Gonzalez and Asociados. We represent Esperanza Gonzalez in the action for defamation, labor discrimination, and civil rights violation that was filed against you this morning in the federal court. Thomas almost choked on the coffee. What are you talking about? What Gonzalez? Do you mean the household I fired? In fact, Mr. Mitchell, our client is Esperanza Gonzalez, master's degree in business administration from the Honduras National Autonomous Universidad, a specializing researcher in immigrant labor rights, and sister of Dr. Isabella Gonzalez, our senior partner. The silence on the other side of line lasted 15 eternal seconds. Thomas felt the world spin around him as he processed that impossible information. You have an hour to attend our office, Mr. Mitchell. I suggest you bring your lawyer, because the evidence we have make this case very interesting. An hour later, Thomas entered the imposing law firm, accompanied by his private lawyer, Robert Hayes, who had already warned that the situation seemed extremely complicated only by the reputation of the opposing firm. Gentlemen, welcome, said Isabella Gonzalez, an elegant 40-year-old woman whose eyes radiated sharp intelligence as a razor. I hope you have time, because we have a lot to argue. The conference table was covered with dozens of organized folders, tablets, and a television on showing local news sites. Thomas immediately recognized some of the photos. He was himself in several compromising situations. First, let's clarify who my sister is, started Isabella, sliding a folder through the table. Esperanza graduated with praise in business, speaks 4 languages, and has spent the last 3 years to systematically document discriminatory practices against immigrants on farms in the region. Thomas flipped the documents with increasing horror. There were photos, audio recordings, detailed wage spreadsheets, working conditions, racist comments, all meticulously documented for 3 years. Your domestic, Mr. Mitchell, was actually conducting a master's research on the exploration of immigrant workers, and you became your main case study. This is impossible, Thomas murmured, his voice failing. She was just an ignorant Honduran immigrant? Completed Isabella with a cold smile. Exactly the kind of prejudice we documented. Robert Hayes tried to minimize. Even if it's true, that doesn't change the fact that there was a theft. About it, interrupted Isabella, linking the television. Maybe we should start with the end of this fascinating story. The screen showed Marcus Jenkins, former capataz of Mitchell Farm, being interviewed by a local reporter. I found the ring 3 days after it was fired lying on the office floor. When I confronted Mr. Mitchell, he told me to keep his mouth closed, or I would lose my job as well. Thomas paled completely. Marcus is a liar. He is being paid to... Isabella raised her hand, interrupting it, and reproduced an audio on the tablet. Thomas's unmistakable voice echoed through the room. Eleanor, you know how it is. I lost the ring in the poker again, but don't worry. I blame the domestic. The recording had been secretly done by Rebecca, who had installed a recording app on her father's phone after witnessing Esperanza's expulsion. Our investigation has revealed even more interesting details, continued Isabella, opening another folder. We found that you owe $347,000 for loan sharks, mortgaged 40% of the farm to cover betting debts, and implemented a systematic defamation campaign against my sister. She slid a telephone list on the table. 17 farmers have confirmed that you personally contacted them, using explicitly discriminatory language to prevent Esperanza from getting a job. We have recordings of 8 of these conversations. Thomas tried to get up, but his legs failed. His lawyer read the documents with expression of increasing panic. And there are more, said Isabella, playing another video on the tablet. It was Rebecca Mitchell, now 17, giving formal testimony. My father invented the story of the theft to hide that he lost the ring betting. I have a recording of expulsion and proof that he threatened employees to maintain silence. His own daughter betrayed him, Mr. Mitchell, said Isabella with clinical coldness. Just like his wife, who provided us with full financial documents proving his game debts and the illegal loans he made using the farm as a guarantee. Thomas finally understood the magnitude of what he was facing. It was not just a labor process. It was the complete and systematic destruction of everything that had built. What do you want? He asked, his voice reduced to a desperate whisper. Isabella smiled, but without any heat. Justice, Mr. Mitchell. Complete and irreversible. She opened one last folder, revealing documents from a collective process. We found Maria Ruiz, Carmen Vasquez, and Ana Morales, 3 other immigrant women you have dismissed on false accusations in the last 5 years. They have signed as co-authors in federal action. Thomas knew he was defeated, completely, irreversibly defeated by a woman who had underestimated just an ignorant domestic. The media already has the story, Mr. Mitchell. CNN, Univision, all the big vehicles. You have become the national symbol of everything that is wrong with the treatment of immigrants. At that moment, Thomas Mitchell realized that his arrogance had created the very instrument of its destruction, and the woman he had publicly humiliated was not only smarter than him, he was infinitely more powerful. The question that echoed in that room was not if Thomas would be destroyed from that meeting, but if something was left of his life to rebuild after Esperanza and Isabella Gonzalez ended with him. 6 months after the devastating confrontation at the law firm, Thomas Mitchell was sitting in a cheap cafeteria, flipping through job classifieds with trembling hands. The man who once owned a 500 hectares farm now survived with temporary gardening work. The process had just been the beginning of its fall. The national exhibition turned Thomas into the perfect symbol of the racist and abusive boss that explores immigrants. His photo circulated for all the news, accompanied by the humiliating recordings where he called Hispanic workers parasites and profiteers. Eleanor had requested divorce a week after the confrontation, taking half of the remaining assets and the full guard of Rebecca. The teenage daughter completely refused to talk to her father, too embarrassed to explain to friends why her last name constantly appeared in the news as an example of intolerance. The farm, auctioned to cover the debt of the process and loans. Marcus Jenkins, ironically, had become the new property administrator for the new owners, a cooperative of Hispanic rural workers that Isabella Gonzalez had helped to organize. Mr. Mitchell? The female voice made him lift his eyes from the bitter newspaper. It was hopeful, wearing an elegant executive suit, accompanied by 2 other well-dressed women. Thomas felt his stomach turned. In recent months, he had become obsessed with accompanying Esperanza's trajectory through the news. She had become a national figure, speaking at universities on immigrant rights and co-founding an organization that helped exploited workers to seek legal justice. Dr. Gonzalez, he muttered, using the title he never imagined she was entitled to carry. Esperanza sat in the chair in front of him, his eyes revealing a mixture of compassion and firmness that Thomas could not decipher. I heard you are looking for work. The irony of the situation hit him as a punch in the stomach. The woman he had publicly humiliated, expelled in the rain and tried to destroy professionally, was now in a position to offer him a job. Our cooperative needs someone to work in gardening and maintaining the facilities, she continued. Minimum wage without special benefits. Interested? Thomas swallowed dry. Work for the woman who had been your employee? Receive orders from the person he considered inferior? His racist mind rebelled against the idea, but his empty bank account spoke louder. I need work, he admitted, his voice reduced to a humiliated whisper. There is a condition, said Esperanza, sliding a contract on the table. You will work directly with Maria Ruiz, Carmen Vasquez, and Ana Morales, the 3 women you have dismissed unfairly in previous years. They are now your supervisors. Thomas's world collapsed a little more. The 3 women who had participated in the collective process would now be in the position of authority over him. It was the complete and definitive reversal of the hierarchy he considered natural. Why? He asked, genuinely confused. Why offer me this after all I did? Esperanza smiled, but without malice. Because I learned that true justice is not about destroying people, Thomas. It's about giving them a chance to become better. She pointed to a specific clause in the contract. You will work half a time with us, and the other part-time will be dedicated to lectures in schools and companies about the dangers of prejudice and discrimination. It will tell your own history, as an example of how racism destroys not only the victims but also who practices it. Thomas read the contract with tears in his eyes. They were not just tears of humiliation. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope, a chance to rebuild, even if it meant publicly admitting all your mistakes. There is a person who would like to talk to you first, said Esperanza, making a signal. Sophia, now 9 years old, approached the table with a drawing in her hands. "My mother said you were going through a difficult time," she said, handing her the roll. "I drew it to you." It was a simple design of two people planting flow residents, with a bright sun in the sky. The words, "There is always a new chance," were written in colorful letters. Thomas broke completely. He cried as he did not cry from childhood, before the woman who had tried to destroy and her innocent daughter who now offered her forgiveness. 3 years later, in a national conference on labor rights, two people shared the stage. Dr. Esperanza Gonzalez, now a national director of the country's largest immigrant workers' protection organization, and Thomas Mitchell, who had become one of the most impactful speakers about the dangers of prejudice. "I was a man who believed my success gave me the right to humiliate others," Thomas said to an executive audience. "I found out as worse as possible that when you try to destroy someone by prejudice, you are actually building your own destruction." In the front row, Sophia, now 12, watched proudly while her mother received another award for her work in social justice. She had grown up knowing that being strong did not mean being cruel, and that true victory comes when you turn your enemies into better people. Eleanor Mitchell, who had rebuilt his life away from his ex-husband, watched his live broadcast, pleased to see that Thomas had finally found a decent purpose. Rebecca, now a law student at Harvard, following in the footsteps of Isabella Gonzalez, planned to specialize in civil rights. The farm that was once exploration symbol had become the largest training center for state rural workers. Marcus Jenkins trained dozens of immigrants in modern agricultural techniques, while Thomas took care of gardens and helped in maintenance, honest work he had learned to value. "The best revenge," said Esperanza in his final lecture on the conference, "it's not destroying who hurt you. It is to show them that there is a better way to live and give them a chance to choose this better form." He tried to destroy Esperanza, but eventually destroyed the worst version of himself. Esperanza has learned that true justice is not to return the damage suffered. It is turning this damage into the fuel to build a world where other people do not have to go through the same suffering. If this story of transformation and forgiveness has touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that the true force is not defeating your enemies, but to turn them into living examples that we can all make ourselves better, no matter how far we have fallen.